Hello and welcome to another edition of the Global Shapers Live Show. My name is Natalie and I lead the World Economic Forum's Youth Engagement Strategy. And every month we spotlight unique opportunities for young people across the forum and beyond, from new initiatives to emerging collaborations that are shaping our collective future. As we begin, please let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. It's always energizing to see the reach and diversity of our global community in real time. For this final episode of 2025, we will turn our attention to the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos and what awaits us in January. But first, let's begin with a quick roundup of what's happening across our network. First, great leadership is built on shared ownership, and the strength of our decentralized community relies on our annual election cycle to ensure that every hub chooses the next generation of its leaders. Each year, Global Shapers hubs run elections to ensure continuity, accountability, and collective stewardship. So if you have questions about the upcoming cycle or want clarity on how distributed leadership works in practice, be sure to review our elections guide. Last week, we also released issue 6 of our LinkedIn newsletter, Generation Now, and this edition examines how countries are approaching social media regulation for under 16s following Australia's recent decision to restrict access. We want to know, what do you think about this issue? Share your views in the chat. This latest edition also explored new research on why the most connected generation may also be the loneliest. And importantly, you'll also find a new section spotlighting youth opportunities, including fellowships, awards, and leadership roles with fast approaching deadlines. All of this and much more is featured in the Global Shapers November newsletter. Now, let's move to today's conversation. Joining us in the studio is my colleague, Tanjeb.
Thank you.
He is the head of Event Editorial here at the World Economic Forum. He's also a member of our executive committee. Welcome. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm glad to be here, at least for the last episode. But
last episode, but not the least.
But this is fun.
We're also delighted to be joined virtually by Christy from our Washington, D.C. hub and Mazu from our Accra hub. And together, we'll explore today's focus, the World Economic Forum's annual meeting, why it matters, what makes it distinct, and how young people are contributing to the agenda. So, Tanjeb, maybe to jump in and get started, we know that this year's annual meeting takes place against really unprecedented global changes and challenges. Yeah. And so I want to ask you, maybe to get us started, what's the theme of this year's meeting and why does it matter?
No, thanks, Natalie. Again, it's quite exciting to be here with the Shapers community. Funny, in your introduction, you mentioned quite a few points, which are already our sessions that you can explore in my forum, and as well as on our website, including on the loneliest generation, where we'll have Jonathan Haidt, for example, coming in to kind of explain that, who's really the foremost expert on it. Now, to come back to your question, I think what we need to kind of do is step back, right? Like, I think we are in the midst of what is, two significant transformations at play when it comes to the global economy. On one hand, you have artificial intelligence as a general purpose technology really accelerating everything around us. So the opportunities that come with it, the risks on the downside of it, has had a tremendous impact on that aspect of it. And the second part of it, which is the fact that we are living in probably the most fragmented times of our world, or at least in peacetime, right? So in that context where we are, is you have two very opposite forces at play, with very divergent views on each of them. So the way what we are looking at for Davos in January is the fact that each of these points have their own viewpoints, and they have people who represent those viewpoints. So the spirit of dialogue, which is our theme for the upcoming annual meeting, kind of tries to build that common understanding amongst world leaders, amongst the many constituents who would be coming into Davos in January. And that we feel is very important, because I think there's no way, it's not just the consensus or solutions that one can reach, but there is no way we will even get to that point if we don't understand where we each come from or what we represent. So I think that's what the spirit of dialogue for us means. It also goes back to the ethos of the organization of really being public-private cooperation at the heart of it, and that's something which, 56 years on, from the foundation of the World Economic Forum, we believe it's still true.
I feel like this year's Spirit of Dialogue theme is very much also the mission of Global Shapers hubs in 500 cities around the world. So it's perfectly resonant, I think, with our online audience. This is the 56th annual meeting. Of course, every year the theme changes, but there's also multiple changes. And so I want to ask you, what makes this year distinct? Maybe it's its urgency, maybe it's the agenda, maybe it's participants. What do you think?
I think it would be naive for me to say that it's none of the three, or the honest answer would be all three, right? Like, I think the fact is that if you look at the innovation that we try and carry out, this year, for the first time, for example, we are introducing a podcast format. So we are going with leading podcasters to invite them into the annual meeting, so that they can go live with their audience. And again, it's a different take on maybe 20 years ago when we went to traditional media and did TV debates, right? So that innovation to a certain extent is obviously true. Number two is, if I stick to that aspect of it from a program point of view, we are trying to do a town hall format as well, which is, right, really opening up leaders to kind of answer questions from the audience. So it's not just a curated stakeholder dialogue, but an opportunity for all participants who are interested in these dilemmas that world leaders are facing, from knowledge, education, to the economy, to AI, to kind of ask leaders questions on how do they see and how do they navigate these dilemmas. Third but not least, as you say, the people is always an important ingredient as we look at the annual meeting, and there is a constant rotation of leaders that we see, and we are always welcome to kind of welcome. We are always ready to welcome whoever's willing to come onto our platform to kind of share their message.
I am talking about that unique mix of people and stakeholders and the conversations that are had. I want to ask you maybe like the most basic question for our online viewers, maybe who are tuning in for the first time to the annual meeting this year.
Yeah.
In your words and in your opinion, why do you think the World Economic Forum's annual meeting every year in Davos, in an alpine town, bringing together world leaders across sectors, geographies, industries, why do you think this meeting matters? And from your perspective, you're in charge and responsible for the overarching architecture of the meeting. What types of conversations or decisions that could take place, what kind of effect might they have in the months or the years to come if we get this right?
Ooh, that's a tough question. But I think, again, what makes the forum unique, and I think this is where, again, to our audience there, I think it's why the unique blend of it. Let me start actually with the first basic aspect of it there, Natalie. I think the beauty of the forum in a way is the way we look at it is not a conference. It is a meeting of our communities. I think that's the fundamental belief, right? Like, which is very important. Now, members within that communities can rotate, they can alter, they can change, they can graduate, all of the above. But at the end of the day, there is a common sense of purpose. There's a common community that they are all part of. And I think it's the accumulation and the mixture of these communities that makes it very unique. Then if you look at then within those, the individual aspects of it, right? Like, let's start on governmental leaders, right? You have 350 governmental leaders kind of coming in on their own, about 60 heads of state and government within that. One may argue when we look at the UN General Assembly or some of these that you have higher numbers and all of that, but they're not there, as you say, in a small alpine town, concentrated within those 3 to 4 days throughout. That happens in New York, which is massive, right? Like on that end. The second community, if you look at from that end, is we have about 900 CEOs or chairs of companies. You add this 350 with this 900, that's about 1,200 of our 3,000 participants who are really your foremost decision makers on a range of issues, sectors, countries, etc. And then you add the change makers to it, right? Like we're speaking to the Shapers community here, but let's not forget we have our young global leaders, we have the social entrepreneurs. Increasingly, we are seeing active participation from our global innovators community, the tech pioneers community. And then for me, the last but not least is the broader civil society, experts, media voices. This year, for example, we have 12 Nobel laureates coming to the annual meeting, right? So the accumulation and the curation of this is, it's not just it randomly happens. We are curating as we finish one year's annual meeting to the next. So the aspect of this is the accumulation of them in one spot at the beginning of the year to kind of really set, to kind of set the agenda of what they will focus on. And I think from that end, it really makes the experience unique. And I think that's what I think when people look at Davos, particularly as a general public looking at it from outside, I think it's these insights that these group of people can bring when they're brought in together.
That's such a helpful context setter, I think, as we enter in today's conversation. And the way you describe the unique stakeholders that come together, it's about bringing leaders together to understand the global outlook, to understand global issues, and then ultimately, through their individual capacities, moving the world forward in whatever agenda or whatever area they have critical mass and the potential and capabilities to do so. You talked about some of those stakeholders. I want to invite in one of our global shapers who's on the line. Christy, I'm happy you're here with us. Christy is a member of our DC Hub, and Christy joined us at the annual meeting 2025 earlier this year. And I want to ask you a similar question, Christy. What was your takeaway and what was your experience at the annual meeting like, first and foremost?
Thank you so much, Natalie, for the opportunity to be here. My biggest takeaways from the annual meeting were threefold. So first, I really noticed a clear shift from kind of conversation to delivery. So across different sectors, geographies, I really saw that leaders were far less focused on really making declarations and really focusing on what could realistically be implemented in the short term. I saw this both on and off stage and how all the discussions kind of centered on different trade-offs and constraints and execution rather than just big ambitions. My second takeaway was that partnerships I found were really key. I saw this in the main sessions, and obviously when stakeholders came together to just challenge one another, exchange ideas, and really make progress. But some of my most meaningful exchanges really took place over coffee or between the sessions, and it was those informal moments that really created space for problem solving and those unexpected connections. And that's really what shaped some of my experience at Davos far more than I actually anticipated. And the third takeaway, and probably the most important for me, was just how clear it became that young leaders are genuinely needed in decision-making spaces like Davos. And Davos felt surprisingly equalizing. So people were keen to engage in dialogue and to hear new ideas, to collaborate regardless of ages or titles or different communities that they may be part of. And that diversity of perspectives and background and the lived experience that young leaders actually brought to the table, I found really meaningfully strengthened the conversations that were happening. I think also outside of the takeaways, the Global Shapers community and the forum did such a great job of really integrating young leaders as peers, rather than just positioning young leaders as kind of separate or symbolic participants. And that's just a program that was led by obviously the Shapers community, and the Zurich Hub played a huge role in that. It really ensured that before Davos, leaders really arrived confident and informed and ready to contribute. So overall, I expected Davos to be such an incredible opportunity, but it really exceeded my expectations and my takeaways. I couldn't conceptualize before I attended how I could contribute maybe to progress after the conference, but it became very, very clear after making intentional connections at the conference just how I could continue to make impact and progress as an individual and as part of the Shaper community as well.
And Christy, you were such an important part of our delegation. And when we look to the future, many of our young leaders who will attend January this winter, attend Davos this January, they're asking you for your advice. And so I want to know, Christy, what advice would you give fellow young leaders who will take kind of the torch into this year's annual meeting? What advice would you give?
Yes, I found that being a young leader in this space, it felt very empowering. It's not, Davos isn't just about having a seat at the table as a young leader, but it's really knowing what you're bringing to the table. And so, as I mentioned, I didn't quite know what to expect before attending Davos, which I'm sure those who are attending and tuning in are feeling. I've been to different conferences and have been the youngest in the room sometimes, but it it really felt different at Davos because you're representing yourself, but also you're the voice of the Global Shapers community, and that's your hub, your community, and other young leaders who also don't have the opportunity perhaps to be in Davos in person. So I did feel quite a responsibility to go to the meeting, not just with topics that I care about in mind, but really to understand the needs of my community and my hub to ensure that I was representing this in that space as much as I could. But in terms of advice, when I was preparing for Davos, I was seeking advice and support. But to those of you who are attending this year, I really want you to know that you've done everything that you can. You know yourself the best, and there's no better person to represent you than yourself. And you've been chosen to represent your hub and community. And so having this should feel empowering and be confident in yourself and your abilities. So I think my biggest piece of advice is to be intentional, know the issues that you care most about, know the conversations that you want to engage in, and what perspectives that you want to bring, and maybe what you can bring that others may not be able to. So just remember that you don't have to be everywhere and meet everyone, and the depth of interactions really matters far more than the number of interactions that you have. Um, I'll say that Davos can feel intimidating, as we mentioned, from the outside, but actually once you're there or once you're tuning in online, it becomes really clear that what's most valued is not having all the answers, but really just being able to ask good questions and be able to connect ideas across sectors. And as a young leader, that ability to bridge between generations and disciplines and also lived experiences is a real strength. And so I have absolutely no doubt that the Shapers this year will absolutely bring this expertise and energy. I also wanted to add some perhaps practical pieces of advice, which is having an elevator pitch on yourself. You will definitely need it. And this is just a great tip to have on hand, even if you're not attending Davos. And to make sure that you take care of yourself and the other young leaders around you. You're all a team, and they will, without a doubt, become some of the strongest connections that you will make there. There will be a lot of FOMO, and you'll be wanting to attend every single session. So just come prepared for perhaps a little less sleep than you may ordinarily have received. But the last practical piece of advice is to be confident and kind. Everyone is human, and connect with people at a human level because it goes a lot further than you think. And for those attending virtually as well, I would really recommend to just engage with the sessions and think about what you would agree or perhaps disagree or challenge, because next year this may be you attending Davos as well.
Thank you so much, Christy. I'm always inspired by your expertise, but also just your kindness and loveliness. So thank you. You are not only an outstanding youth voice and global shaper, But you're also the vice president at one of the world's most influential financial institutions, and you're representing also strategic partner companies of the World Economic Forum. And you do so with grace and insight, and so thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Natalie.
For our online viewers, Christy also recently published an outstanding article on why the 80th UN General Assembly marked a turning point for youth leadership, and you can read it on the World Economic Forum's blog. Do check it out. Tanjeb, I have a few more questions for you. We're not letting you out of the studio yet. So Christy talked about this, and I think it's important to mention the World Economic Forum was one of the first international organizations to set a systemic youth quota at its annual meeting. And why, in your opinion, are young leaders an important stakeholder in the forum's model, enriching maybe conversations in Davos?
I think if you go back to what I was highlighting in the context of really having this multi-stakeholder approach, like if it's not just in our sessions, or I think Christy very eloquently kind of indicated that, you know, there's like 500 sessions that is happening, a lot in the public program, a lot in the private program, a lot of these serendipitous moments of when people are grabbing coffee. You know, we live the multi-stakeholder approach in our context of, like, you know, in the organization, in the work that we do. So it's not just that it's a quota. I think it's an integral part of the proceedings that we have in Davos. And I think when you look at it from the aspect of how, if in today's world or generation, the way I look at it, even with some of the change-making companies, right? Like, look at the tech pioneers, look at the global innovators. We've had someone like Sam Altman come in as a global innovator 2 years ago. We had Dario Amodeo come in as a global innovator last year. And look at the scale and aspects that they've grown into, right? So even with companies, if I may put it that way, it comes back to the fact that who we are calling our, you know, the younger voices, or will become an integral part of the conversation tomorrow. And the beauty of it, in a way, with Davos is the fact that we hear them first, right? Like, so we will have, and I think it's whether it's programmatically, whether it's from an institutional perspective, I do see a lot of value in having those disruptors kind of really challenge the status quo. And it's not just about a debate or anything of that, you know, just being different, but it's also about the fact that at the end of the day, many of these communities, many of these people will be the decision makers of tomorrow.
I love that, and I feel like it's so true. And it's something, of course, that I strongly believe in the Global Shapers community too. It's not a matter of just youth inclusion. It's a strategic imperative to ensure that our future is represented. And I feel like Christy mentioned it, bridging generational divides, offering strategic foresight on emerging trends, on horizon topics that may not be pressing now, but they will be, especially when our members and when young people maybe are in more different positions of power than they are now. And so I think that strategic contribution is really powerful. Maybe another question I want to ask you about, and it goes to that strategic contribution. Much of the work we do is about building partnerships, bringing stakeholders together. When you think about some of the partnerships, alliances, or outcomes from this meeting that you're hopeful to see, what are you hoping comes out of this meeting?
You know, at the forum, I always say this, right? Like, Davos is the beginning and end of every cycle, right? Like, we have close to about 160 initiatives at the World Economic Forum. I don't know the exact number, but I'm fairly confident about 75 to 80% of them were kind of launched in Davos on that end. While I'm not privy to exactly disclose all of them, but I do know there's quite a few exciting ones that are coming up. I think watch out for the sessions. That's all I'm going to leave it at.
You'll see the headlines.
You'll see the headlines. But across, and I think what's important here is it's not just initiatives that are concerning just a particular segment or, again, a particular industry. I think for this year, for example, across these 5 global challenges that we are highlighting, right? Whether it's cooperation in a more contested world, it's how do we better invest in people, how do we grow within our planetary boundaries, how do we identify these new growth models? Across all of them, you will see some major announcements that are coming up. Starting from the 19th of January, all of our sessions are live streamed. That's the other interesting thing. We're not trying to hide anything. It is there in the public domain. You'll find it on our website. You'll find it on my forum. So I would encourage you to kind of keep, watch that space, basically.
That's a great teaser. We have a few rapid fire questions we're going to ask you at the end of this episode. But first, I want to turn it over to Mazu. Mazu is joining us from our Accra hub. And congratulations, first and foremost. You were selected from over 700 young applicants around the world to attend the annual meeting this year. And you'll be bringing youth perspectives directly to the table. So, Mazu, I'm curious to ask you, what are you most looking forward to, and what expertise are you contributing to this meeting?
Thank you very much, Natalie, for the kind introduction. And I'm over the moon to be attending the 56th annual meeting of WEF. For me, I think it's a great privilege, but also a huge responsibility to be able to echo the voice of young people, but also, most importantly, underserved young people, because I am one of them. I grew up in an underserved community, and I saw firsthand the challenges I've had to overcome to acquire a quality education and to get a job and all of that. So for me, what I'm most excited about generally is the theme of this year's meeting, a spirit of dialogue. Because let's remember, we are currently in a world where there are conflicts in the Middle East. We're in a world where by 2030, about 80% of poor people are still going to be in Africa. That is over 20% of that number 2 decades before. So whilst there might be growth and development in other parts of the world, and rightly so, even within Africa, there is widening inequality. So we are in a world where, whilst there's growth happening, other communities are constantly being marginalized. For me personally, my biggest expertise for this year's annual meeting is to advocate for inclusive and equitable development that does not leave anyone behind. We often talk about the artificial intelligence, and I'm happy that this year, one of the main topics that we'll be discussing at the annual meeting is how AI would drive a new wave of entrepreneurship. And this is one of the sessions I am particularly very excited about. I'm looking to hear from experienced leaders and to share my own personal perspectives, having worked with young entrepreneurs in some of these communities for over the last 7 years. I'm also very excited about one of the key topics, which is the coming jobs crisis in emerging markets. And I'm looking forward to contribute to this session, particularly talking about how governments can move beyond just thinking about everyday social good to actually implementing policies that lift people out of poverty. Why is it that, we've had such instances in China where over a generation, so many people, over 2 billion, were lifted out of poverty, whilst poverty is still growing in continents like Africa? How can leaders from these different parts of the world join to contribute and see how to replicate similar solutions in different parts of the world to ensure that, like I said earlier, there's equitable and there's inclusive growth and development across the world? So these are some of the things I'm personally very excited about, and I'll be looking forward to contributing my personal expertise to.
Thank you so much, Mazu. That's so helpful. We're grateful to have you here with us today, and we're very grateful to see you in January with us at the annual meeting. I want to make sure we also get to Beatrice, my colleague, who is going to tell us a little bit more about how our online viewers can participate and join the annual meeting from home. So with that, let's make sure that we move on to the next segment. For those who are interested, of course, to watch the meeting online, let's turn next to Beatrice. So over to you, Beatrice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beatrice Di Caro. I manage the World Economic Forum's social media. And welcome to the December edition of the Global Shapers Show. As we look ahead to the annual meeting 2026, today takes a closer look at what AM26 will focus on and how to follow the key moments online. This year, we'll be streaming the public program on our website and streaming the top sessions across our social media channels so you can follow along from anywhere in the world. You can follow us at World Economic Forum for our English language channels, Foro Económico Mundial for our Spanish accounts, and Shijie Jingji Luntan on Chinese platforms. We'll be covering top quotes, key moments, interviews, launches, and reports, and giving you an inside look at how Davos connects people together and drives real impact. Make sure to engage with our content online by using our official event hashtag WEF26. We'll be following your posts, amplifying your perspectives, and showcasing how people around the world are connecting with the meeting. We're looking forward to bringing you the very best of Davos. See you soon.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. And thank you to both Christy and Mazu for joining us today. This nearly wraps up another episode of the Global Shapers live show, but I have a few questions for Tanjeb, and these are the questions our viewers want to know. So they're rapid fire, one-line answer.
Sounds good.
Your most memorable session at an annual meeting ever?
At an annual meeting ever. So before this, I used to manage our government engagement for Asia Pacific. We had a session on, I'm an economist by training, so we had a session on Beyond GDP where the then Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, was on it. I believe Prince William was on it. Fascinating. And I used to cover, before this I used to be at the World Bank, I used to cover Bhutan as well, which pioneered the concept of going beyond GDP. So it was really fascinating to see leaders thinking about it beyond, and actually planning out what they need to do. So it was great.
I love that. For me, it's so clear in my mind. At the annual meeting in 2019, we had 5 youth co-chairs, co-chairs under 30. That press conference, you can still watch it online. It was incredible. One stereotype about young people that you'd like to challenge?
Oof. This is tough. That they're not prepared.
Oh my goodness, yes. I agree with that. Look at this episode as just testament of that. One piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
Should have signed up to be in the Shapers Hub in Dhaka.
It's not too late to be a founding curator. One personal highlight from 2025?
2 months ago, my wife and I had our second child. Kept me away for about a month in the peak of Davos preparation. So great personal highlight. My team feels differently, I'm sure, but yeah.
Oh, congratulations. I also welcomed a new baby.
Yes.
And so last Davos I watched from home on maternity leave with a brand new baby at home with me. But I'm looking forward to being back at the annual meeting.
Well, as Christy said, you won't get much sleep anyways, whether you're in Geneva or in Davos. So.
And last, but certainly not least, what's one moment in this year's annual meeting in January that no one should miss?
I'm going to give it away. My personal favorite, I think Mazo highlighted it, because when he talked about this emerging markets job session, this was something which I was kind of looking at, again, being from Bangladesh, was something which I was kind of watching out for, because again, the gravity of it is so significant. There's 800 million people who will need, where there's a jobs gap, and that's the size of the economy of China. So I think that is an interesting one for sure. And let me just leave it with this. There could be something very interesting on a Thursday morning, so watch out for that. And it has something to do with football.
Something to do with football. Oh, that's a good cliffhanger. I will, of course, also say there is a not to miss session on Friday morning, and we'll sit with global shapers and important stakeholders who have something to say about the youth agenda and youth outlook. And it's a chance to hear highlights from across the meeting from young participants. So be sure to tune into that session too in January. With that, we'll wrap up our last and final episode of 2025. As we close, let's remember the annual meeting is more than just a moment in January. It's a part of a year-round effort shaped by communities like ours. The Global Shapers community and the World Economic Forum, they play an important role in ensuring that young perspectives are not only present, but meaningfully shaping global conversations. So to every global shaper watching today, your voice and your leadership matters. Thank you for being a part of this movement. We look forward to continuing this journey together in 2026. So we'll see you next year for a brand new season. Happy holidays.